This happened when I was 9 years old, and even now, over 15 years later, it still gives me chills when I think about it. I grew up in a terraced house in a pretty busy neighborhood. Think rows of connected homes, each with a small private patio, separated from a nearby footpath by just a short fence. People were always walking by, especially on weekends, parents pushing strollers, old couples out for their Sunday walks. That was all normal. What wasn't normal was someone standing in my patio like they belonged there. Back then, my school was just a short walk away, maybe 50 meters from home. I'd usually get home about an hour before my mom, and she figured I was old enough to be on my own for that short window. Every day, I'd unlock the front door, double-check the back patio door was locked, and then rush upstairs to get as much PlayStation time as possible before Mom came home and made me do homework. That day was no different, until I heard this strange sound outside my bedroom window. It was this high-pitched noise, almost like a cat meowing. My heart jumped. My cat had been missing for 3 months. I thought maybe, just maybe, he came back. I ran downstairs, flung open the curtains to the patio, and immediately froze. There was a man standing there, a tall man, probably in his 30s, with long, greasy black hair hanging in his face. He looked like something straight out of a horror movie. His mouth was smeared with some kind of brownish liquid, and he was eating from the ashtray, picking out my dad's old cigarette butts and chewing them up while making those awful high-pitched meowing sounds. I stood there, completely paralyzed, watching him like I was stuck in a bad dream. I eventually snapped out of it and screamed, loud. He didn't even flinch, just kept eating. I bolted upstairs, locked my bedroom door, and called my mom in a panic. She told me to stay put, that she was calling the police right away. I crawled under my blankets, listening to that horrible sound echoing up from the patio. The next part's a bit of a blur. I must have blacked out from the fear or stress. But I remember hearing voices outside, ones that didn't belong to the man. The cops had arrived. I peeked through my window and saw 2 officers standing outside the fence, 1 man, 1 woman. I couldn't see the guy directly. He was standing beneath my window, out of sight. But I could hear the officers yelling things like, "Come over here," and "We're not gonna ask again." Then suddenly, chaos. The guy let out this blood-curdling scream and charged straight at them. I heard the female officer go down hard, and I watched in disbelief as the male officer pulled out a taser and hit the guy with it. He dropped, convulsing and shrieking, but the officer had a hard time even keeping him on the ground. The guy was strong. Eventually, he managed to cuff him, and a few minutes later, backup and an ambulance arrived. I'll never forget the look the officer gave me when he noticed me watching from the window. He just shook his head and said, "I sure hope you didn't see all that." I couldn't even respond. I just started crying. An elderly neighbor ended up taking me in until my mom got back. The police took the man away, and later that night, the same male officer came back to explain what had happened. That's when things took a strange turn. The man, his name was Tom, wasn't some random intruder. He had severe autism and had escaped from a nearby care facility. But here's the part that really shook me. Tom used to live in our house. Years ago, before we moved in, he lived there with his mother, his only caregiver. She passed away, and he was relocated to the facility. But clearly, he hadn't forgotten. He probably came back looking for her, thinking she'd still be there. The officer told us Tom had an unusually strong body due to the way his muscles developed over time. That explained how he knocked the officer out cold with 1 hit. I told the officer I never wanted something like that to happen again. He promised it wouldn't. For years, life returned to normal. I moved on, grew up, and eventually bought the house from my parents when they retired. Everything was quiet, until one morning, about a year ago. I was sipping coffee on the patio when I saw a man stop on the path just beyond the fence. He was older now, hair grayer, But when he tilted his head and let out that same high-pitched meow, I knew. It was Tom. My heart dropped. My first instinct was to run, but this time I didn't. I just looked at him, and he looked at me. He smiled. Something in me shifted right then. Instead of panicking, I asked him gently if he wanted to come down to the patio. He didn't hesitate, just hopped the fence like it was nothing. I braced myself, thinking he might lash out, but he didn't. He just smiled again. I invited him to sit. No response. Then I offered to let him come inside. He started giggling like a kid. The moment we stepped into the house, it was like a light flicked on in his head. He looked around, beaming. He sat down on the couch, turned on the TV, and put on cartoons. He didn't say a word, just watched, totally absorbed, like he was home again. I let him be. I called the care facility, and they came to pick him up about 10 minutes later. He cried when they asked him to leave, but eventually he got up, still smiling through tears. I followed up with them later, and we ended up making a plan. Now every Sunday, Tom comes by with his caretakers. We sit on the couch and watch cartoons together. It's the highlight of his week, and honestly, it's become one of the best parts of mine too. Back when I was 9, I never wanted to see that man on my patio ever again. Now I look forward to every Sunday when I get to hang out with my friend Tom. This happened when I was 12, so over 10 years ago now. I grew up in a small, quiet town in Oklahoma. You know the kind. Houses pretty far apart, with patches of wood separating each one. Not much ever happened out there, which made what did happen even creepier. It was a regular school day, and my grandma picked me up like usual. My parents worked late, so this was one of the first years I was allowed to get dropped off at home by myself instead of going to her place. Normally, I'd be alone for just over an hour, from about 3 p.m. to 4:30 when my dad or mom got back. No big deal. But that day, my dad wasn't coming home until 7, and my mom, who's a teacher, had parent-teacher conferences and wouldn't be back until around 8. It was early fall, so it didn't start getting dark until about 8:30. I thought I had the house to myself for a relaxing afternoon. So I did what I always did. Ran upstairs, fired up the Xbox 360, and jumped into Minecraft with one of my best friends, Seth. We were just messing around, building stuff and talking trash like we always did, when about 2 hours in, I heard something that pulled me right out of the game. A car door shut, in my driveway. I froze. Nobody was supposed to be home yet. I walked over to the window that overlooked our driveway, headset still on, controller in hand, and looked outside. There was a red pickup truck parked in the middle of the driveway, sideways, like the driver didn't care at all. I didn't recognize the truck. No one in my family drove anything like it. That's when I saw him. A guy in a camo hoodie and jeans, wearing a hat, walking up our path to the front door like he belonged there. It was September, still hot out, so the heavy hoodie was weird on its own. But something about the way he moved, it just felt off. I told Seth someone was outside. Knock, knock. The guy was at the door now, but before I could react, he started heading back down the path. I moved to another window to keep eyes on him, thinking maybe he'd just walk back to his truck and leave. He didn't. He passed his truck and walked right over to the side of our house, straight to the garage door. Then he tried the handle, just flat out grabbed it and pulled. It was locked. At this point, I told Seth, "Dude, he's trying to get into my house." My heart was racing. This was in broad daylight, around 5 p.m., and this guy was just casually testing doors like he owned the place. Then he disappeared around back toward our patio. I dropped my headset and quietly ran downstairs. I didn't want to be near the windows, so I ducked behind the wall that separated the living room from the back door. I just listened. I heard him jiggle the back door. Then I heard a loud thud, like he dropped a brick or something heavy onto the concrete. I was frozen, paralyzed. I wanted to call someone, my grandma, my parents, anybody, but I didn't have a cell phone yet. The only phone in the house was a landline in the kitchen. in full view of the living room and back windows. There was no way I was risking it. A few seconds passed. I peeked around the corner. He was gone. I bolted back upstairs and told Seth everything. He was still on the mic. While I was talking to him, I heard the truck door slam shut again. I ran back to the window and saw the guy sitting in the driver's seat now. Finally, he was leaving. But before he pulled out, I got a good look at the bed of the truck. 2 things: a shovel and a crowbar. That's it. Seth told me to grab my iPod and try to snap a picture of the license plate. But the way he was parked, I couldn't see it. After a couple minutes, he slowly reversed out of the driveway and disappeared down the road. I waited a bit, then cautiously made my way back downstairs to figure out what that thud was. When I got to the back door, I saw the doormat had been moved. Both of our big plant pots had been shifted too. He was looking for a key, and we did have one hidden out there, but it was under a smaller pot on a ledge next to the door, not the big ones. Thank God he didn't find it. I checked the front porch too. Same story, all the pots had been moved. After he was gone for sure, I called my dad and told him what happened. When he got home, he called the police. A cop came out and I gave him the full rundown. The description of the truck, what the guy looked like, what he tried to do. I never saw that man again, but I still think about what would have happened if he had found that key. This happened a few years back when I was living with my ex-boyfriend. We'd just moved into this little 2-bedroom house and were still settling in. The place had only 1 bathroom, which could only be accessed through the 2nd bedroom, so we decided to set that room up as an office. That way, when friends stayed over on the couch, they wouldn't have to walk through our bedroom just to use the bathroom at night. It made sense at the time. We'd only been in the house for maybe a month when this happened. My ex was out one night hanging out with people from work, and I had the place to myself. I'd spent the evening watching TV and eating takeout. Pretty normal stuff. A couple of times I thought I heard something weird, some light rattling or shuffling, but every time I paused the TV to listen, it would stop. I brushed it off. Old house sounds. Nothing to worry about. Later, I decided to hop on my laptop in the office for a bit before heading to bed. We hadn't had a phone line installed yet, and I didn't have credit on my pay-as-you-go cell, so I was completely cut off. No way to call or text anyone if something went wrong. At the time, that didn't seem like a big deal, but I'd regret it later. So I'm sitting in the office with this small desk lamp on, just enough light to see the keyboard. I've got some music playing softly while I type, when I hear that same faint rattling noise again. Barely noticeable, but it was there. I turned the music off and listened. Nothing. I got up, walked into our bedroom, and looked down at the front door from the window. Nobody there. I checked the window in the office that overlooked our backyard, but it was too dark to see anything. The yard was small, boxed in by a tall brick wall and a heavy wooden gate. There weren't any lights out there, so it was basically pitch black. I didn't see anything, so I went back to my laptop and turned the music back on. Maybe 10 minutes later, I hear something else. This time, it was a metal-on-metal sound, really faint, but it sent chills down my spine. It was that unmistakable screech of something like metal dragging against a lock, or maybe a latch being forced. It didn't sound like someone trying to make noise. It sounded like someone trying not to. Now I was officially freaked out. I went to our bedroom and grabbed this thick iron rod we'd found shoved in the back of the wardrobe when we moved in. I didn't turn on any lights. I didn't want to give away where I was. I had no way to call anyone, so I was completely on my own if something went down. I went back into the office and quietly locked the door behind me. Then I jammed a chair under the doorknob just in case. I sat there gripping the iron rod and listening. Nothing happened for about 20 minutes. I actually started to feel kind of silly, like maybe I was just psyching myself out because I was alone. I didn't turn the music back on this time, though. Good thing I didn't. A few minutes later, I started hearing voices. 2 of them. Men. They were whispering, and I couldn't make out full sentences, but I could tell they weren't inside. The window in the office was open just a crack, and the voices seemed to be drifting in from the alley behind the house. I moved into the bathroom to try and get a better view. The office and bathroom were shaped in an L around the yard, and the bathroom stuck out further, so I figured I'd get a better angle from there. I climbed up onto the ledge and slowly pushed the window open, straining to see into the alley. I couldn't make out much in the darkness, but the whispering got louder. It was definitely coming from just behind the gate. They were talking about us, me and my ex. I couldn't catch everything, but I heard enough to know they'd seen us move in, seen the electronics and equipment we had. Guitars, computers, cameras, consoles, and I'm guessing they noticed I was home alone that night. It sounded like they were just waiting for the lights to go out so they could break in. I stayed perched on that ledge, heart pounding, when all of a sudden I heard the loudest thud echo up through the alley. They'd stopped being quiet. One of them, maybe both, had started throwing themselves against the back gate, trying to break it open. I watched as the entire thing shook with each hit. The wood groaned under the pressure. These weren't small guys, and I'm only about 5'3", maybe 105 pounds. There was no way I could take on even one of them if they got inside. I remember just standing there, gripping that iron rod with both hands, trying to figure out where I could hide or what I'd do if they made it in. Then, bam, this bright, blinding light lit up the entire yard and alley. At first I thought they had a flashlight or something, and I ducked down, thinking they'd seen me. But then I heard a dog barking, and then someone shouting. I peeked out and realized it was the house across the alley. They had a motion sensor floodlight in their backyard, and it had turned on. The whole alley was suddenly lit up. I heard the 2 guys cursing, and then their footsteps pounding down the alley as they ran off into the night. I didn't move from that room until my ex came stumbling in drunk at around 4 a.m. I was still holding the iron rod when he got there. Didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, I went out into the yard and found the gate hanging by one hinge. They'd nearly ripped it clean off. I checked the lock, and the metal around the keyhole was scratched and dented like someone had been trying to force it open. If they hadn't triggered that light, I honestly don't know what would have happened. This happened 6 years ago, back when I was 20. That morning, I got home pretty early, around 8 a.m., after spending the night at my boyfriend's place. He had to start his shift early, so I figured I'd just head home and get a few more hours of sleep. I knew I had the house to myself. My parents had left about an hour earlier to start their vacation, and they were going to be gone for 2 whole weeks. I got inside, kicked off my shoes, and headed toward the stairs to go up to my room when something caught my eye. The kitchen door, the one that also has a window, was wide open. At first, I was just kind of confused. It didn't really register as dangerous. But my dad? He's paranoid. The man double-checks every lock and window before going anywhere, even if I'm staying behind. And I usually wasn't home much anyway. I mostly stayed at my boyfriend's place at the time. So for him to leave something open like that? Pretty unlikely. Still, I was half asleep and didn't think too hard about it. I shut the door, gave a quick look through the kitchen and living room just to be safe, and went upstairs. Our house has 2 floors, and the second floor has 3 bedrooms. I changed clothes in my room, went to the bathroom, and came back to bed. And for some reason, something I never did, I locked my bedroom door. I laid down, started scrolling on my phone, just relaxing, when I heard it. Footsteps, right on the other side of my bedroom door. And suddenly, every little moment from the last few minutes started replaying in my mind. That door being wide open. How quiet the house was. How careless I'd been just walking around like nothing was wrong. Someone had been in the house the entire time. Watching, waiting. I froze. I couldn't even breathe. I looked around and grabbed the first thing I could use to defend myself, my babyless hair straightener. I sat there, locked in my room, staring at the door and just waiting for it to swing open. If it had, I swear I would have jumped out the window without a second thought, just to escape. I don't know how long I stayed like that, but eventually, I heard footsteps again. This time, going down the stairs. Slow, steady. Whoever was in the house was trying to leave quietly. I didn't move until I was sure I couldn't hear anything else. Then I called my boyfriend and told him everything. He rushed over and searched the house. At first, even I was starting to question myself. I didn't see anyone. I didn't catch anyone. Was I just being paranoid? But then we checked the kitchen door. The lock had clearly been forced. There were fresh marks around the frame and the window latch. Someone had broken in. And the only reason nothing happened was because I came home when they weren't expecting it. Now here's where it gets even creepier. They didn't take anything. My mom's MacBook was sitting on the kitchen table. Her jewelry was in plain sight. My PS4, my dad's expensive gaming PC, none of it was touched. They could have easily grabbed something, but it looked like they hadn't even tried. And that's what still haunts me. Because if they weren't there to rob the place, then what were they really after? At the time, I was really active on Snapchat. I'd post my whole day, where I was, what I was doing, even when I was coming home. I had over 5,000 followers, most of whom I didn't know personally. Thinking back, I realized just how easy it would have been for someone to track my movements, figure out when I'd be alone, and plan around it. Maybe they saw my post about my parents leaving. Maybe they knew I was supposed to be staying at my boyfriend's that night. It's hard not to connect the dots. After that, I completely shut down my Snapchat activity. I couldn't take the chance. Even now, years later, I live alone and still find myself jumping at every creak in the floorboards. I check my locks at least 3 times before going to bed. That one morning completely changed the way I live. I just woke up in the middle of the night thinking about something that happened years ago. Something I've tried to forget, but it still creeps back into my mind sometimes. I need to get this off my chest. When I was around 16, I lived in this old, half-falling apart house with my dad and brothers. It was out in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by woods and long dirt roads. The kind of place where your nearest neighbor is still a solid drive away. Our landlord owned the property, and instead of rent, my older brother would do odd jobs and repairs around his place. He never really seemed off or threatening, not that I had many encounters with him. I mostly stayed inside when he came around. And when my dad was home, the guy kept his distance. One afternoon, I was home alone. My dad and brothers had gone out, can't remember where, but they'd be gone a while. It was just me and our dog, who was outside in the fenced yard. I was probably playing The Sims or something. My bedroom window looked straight down the driveway, which stretched a long way through the trees. You'd definitely hear anyone coming before they even reached the house. That's when I saw a car. It wasn't ours, and I instantly panicked. I ran through the house, pulling the blinds closed, flipping off the lights, locking every door I could. Then I peeked through a crack and saw who it was. The landlord. He lived about 2 miles down the road. Yeah, that was the closest neighbor. And this wasn't the first time he'd shown up unannounced. It had happened twice before. Both times, I was alone. Both times, he just kind of wandered around outside for a bit, didn't knock, didn't call out, and then left. But this time, something felt different. I grabbed a big kitchen knife and crouched under the kitchen table. My dog was barking nonstop outside. I heard the landlord open the gate and yell, "Shut up, mutt!" Then came the sound of footsteps on the porch. He tried the front door, rattled the handle. I texted my dad immediately. He said he was on his way, but he was still an hour out. The guy didn't leave. He started circling the house, trying to peek through windows, checking every entrance. This old place had 3 doors, and I could hear him testing all of them. At first, I thought maybe he didn't know I was home. Maybe he was just being nosy. But then I heard it. He called out my name. He knew I was inside. He knew I was alone. I followed the sound of his voice through the hallway, moving quietly, trying to hear what he was saying. The walls were thick and old, but then he yelled something that made my blood run cold. "I'm going to burn the house down, but I'll let you out first." That moment is frozen in my mind. I didn't take him seriously. Some part of me thought he was just being weird, not actually dangerous. But looking back, that's the scariest part. Because what if I had believed him? What if I'd opened that door? He was trying to lure me out, trying to make me panic. And if I'd done what he wanted, I have no doubt my life would have taken a much darker turn. He hung around for what felt like forever, probably close to an hour, just pacing, calling out, trying the doors. But he finally left before my dad got back. I told my dad everything, and we moved out not long after that. But one thing still haunts me to this day. He knew my dad wasn't home, that I was alone. My dad never passed him on the road, and there were no cars in the driveway, so maybe he figured nobody was there. But how did he know I didn't go with them? That's what keeps me up sometimes. Because the truth is, I think he wasn't guessing. I think he'd been watching. I've been meaning to share this for a few days now, but every time I tried typing it out, I'd get hit with a wave of anxiety and just stop. But I'm finally ready. For context, I'm a 21-year-old woman living in a rental house with 5 other people. It's crowded, it's chaotic, but with rent prices being what they are, we take what we can get. Now, usually there's never a quiet moment in the house. Someone's always blasting music, arguing about dishes, or clomping around at odd hours. But last weekend, something magical happened. Everyone was gone. All 5 roommates, off doing their own thing for the weekend. For the first time ever, I had the entire place to myself. And let me tell you, I leaned into it. I watched movies at full volume, took ridiculously long showers, walked around the house braless like I owned the place. It felt like a little vacation from the chaos. It was around 10 p.m. I'd just finished some schoolwork and was curled up with a glass of wine, watching TV. That's when I heard something on the porch. It wasn't loud, just a subtle scraping or shifting sound. We've had a fox that likes to wander onto our porch and make a racket, so I assumed it was just that little menace again. But then I heard it again, louder this time, a clumsy kind of fumbling. So I went to check the window. No one was there. As I turned to head back to the couch, boom! Something smashed straight through our kitchen window. I didn't realize it then, but it was a chunk of cement. I screamed. I might have even peed a little. My first instinct, like an idiot, was to unlock the front door and run outside. Thankfully, some part of my brain yanked the emergency brake on that decision. I relocked the door and sprinted to check the back one, glass, but still locked. Not that it would have mattered much. That's when my grandma's voice popped into my head. Something she used to tell my dad, and he passed down to me. If someone tries to break in, turn off the lights. You know the inside of your house better than they do. So I killed the lights as I made my way upstairs. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the TV off. And just as I reached the stairs, I heard the front doorknob rattling, hard. They were trying to get in. I didn't know how many people were out there. Maybe it was just one, maybe more. All I knew was I was alone. I made it to my bedroom and locked the door behind me. Then I did what anyone mildly panicked and slightly unhinged would do. I duct taped a hunting knife to the end of a hockey stick. Bright pink duct tape, no less. If I was going to fight for my life, I was at least going to look fabulous doing it. I crouched in the dark with my makeshift spear, on the phone with 911. I waited and waited. It was probably only 15 minutes, but it felt like a year. Every creak in the house made my heart jump into my throat. But eventually, I heard knocking on the door and saw red and blue lights flashing through the windows. The cops had finally arrived. I wouldn't have come out of that room if it weren't for those lights. The fear had me glued to the floor. I gave them my statement, and that was it. No follow-up, no real investigation, nothing. One of the officers, though, a woman with tattoos, stayed behind to help clean up the glass while I waited for my brother. She was kind, kept me calm. Honestly, she was the only part of the whole response that felt human. After that, I crashed at my brother's place for a few days. Got in touch with a doctor, started anxiety meds, and something to help with the nightmares, because they came fast and vivid. I know I wasn't physically hurt, but mentally? That night flipped a switch in me. I used to be one of those people who thought, that kind of thing doesn't happen to me. But it did. I'm back home now. The house is loud and crowded again, but I find comfort in the noise. Funny how quickly your idea of peace changes once you've sat in silence holding a weapon made from a knife and a hockey stick.